From the world of AV programming and control with James King, I'm Steve Greenblatt, and this is Ask the Programmer. James, it's great to be back with you. I'm looking forward to this very timely conversation, and we're going to talk a little bit about software and hardware. So welcome. How are you, James?
I'm doing great, Steve. It's great to be back. And this topic, as you say, is very timely and looking to dive into it.
So if we can take a step into the conversation, what we're going to talk a little bit about today is everybody's dealing with the supply chain and hardware, higher lead times, not being able to get the products you need, not being able to complete projects. What do you do when you need a replacement part? All of these things are really impacting the industry, and we don't have solutions for them that are going to be perfect. But one of the things that I think we can spend some time on, and I wrote an article that I can send a link to, is how can we use software to maybe compensate for some of the hardware shortages? And I think we can think a little bit outside the box, but software is pretty powerful. And for years, we've always been using the control system to do workarounds or overcome something that doesn't work exactly the way you need it to, or maybe you have a piece of gear that failed and you need to change the code to compensate for it. Maybe it's a bad input on a switcher. All these things we've been doing for years and years. So what I wanted to talk a little bit about is, if we think outside the box, what can we use software for to be more accommodating and maybe get us around some of these hardware limitations or shortages, but also what can we do to maybe repurpose some of the hardware that we have and use it in different ways by leveraging control. So James, I wanted to see what your thoughts were on that, and then maybe we could talk about a couple of different ideas.
Yeah, this is actually something I've been thinking on my own. I'm looking at our podiums in our classrooms. We have, I would say, not much equipment compared to some other schools I've seen, but we got a decent amount of equipment in there. And I would personally love to see us get to a point where we have almost no equipment or zero equipment inside our podiums, that the faculty members or the users can just come in using the system with very little technology right there for them. So this is something I have thought about, trying to weigh all the pros and cons and see if it's something I can actually roll out in our environment. It's definitely a good topic, and I've look forward to diving in with you in more detail. But I definitely see this being way the AV industry is going.
So if you could elaborate a little bit, what would be your options for taking the hardware out of a podium? Are you talking about cloud? Are you talking about consolidating the equipment,
Yes and yes.
centralizing
So
it?
yeah, I one idea I kind of uh rattled in my head was moving, like, we have in our university wings, where I kind of explain our layout is almost like an airport. You got your center spine, and then you have branches off of that. For our main building, there's other buildings off that, but each area has their own IDF. So my thought was, well, could I leverage the IDF and, throw a central processor in there and a bank of amplifiers and run everything back to the IDF? And that could and then I don't need all that equipment in podiums. And when we do need to service things, we can get to them easily because they're really walk right in, get to them. They're out of the way. So again, enhance their security because now they're not in the classroom, they're in a locked environment. Yes, our podiums are locked, so that's nothing to worry about. But again, it's less playing because they're in a controllable environment of who's going in and out. Um, so that's one thing I thought about. And then I also have toyed with the idea of cloud services, and I do go back and forth on cloud services. I see the huge benefit of it. Again, check out my January article, IT and AV, for the Higher Ed Digital Magazine, because I kind of touch base on this cloud services. Because what's great about cloud services is they're scalable, they're powerful, and there's a expert team dedicated to those servers and takes it away from you and your team. Problem is, when they go down, it's out of your hands. And we saw in December, AWS go down a couple times. And so that does worry me with cloud saying is going there, and say AWS goes down again, and then, oh, sorry, faculty member, you can't turn on your projector because Amazon's down. They're not going to want to hear that. Now, yes, that's a wild example. We have our IR, we can turn on projectors, but just, I think you guys understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I can make tons of jokes about the other things that they may be more concerned with if AWS goes down, but rather than their AV. But it's the whole idea is that you're thinking progressively, and what are different ways to look at things, and how can you get better results, or make systems that can give you the same outcome but be easier to service or easier to maintain, or even consolidate some of the hardware, even though from a user's perspective, they're not going to see very much change. So I think that's a lot of what we're thinking about here is what is this hardware shortage going to what are some of the potential workarounds, but also what are the potential ideas that are going to stem from this situation? Because if it goes on long enough, I don't think that people are going to be stagnant. I think that they're going to find other solutions, and I don't know that you can hold off your needs for very long. One of the things that I touched on, and I think is something to consider too, is are there solutions that can be done where you're not necessarily tied to a particular brand? And I know that nobody really wants to hear that, and I certainly don't want to encourage there to be non-brand loyalty, but can you write software that's more universal, that can work on different products that don't require one and only one particular piece of gear? How can you make your system so that you're increasing the ability to be swappable? So what I mean by that is, for example, if you're talking about a user interface and you're developing in HTML5, you're not tied to any particular hardware for that user interface because so many different products support HTML5. And if it's on a network, it really doesn't matter what that screen looks like. Is it a dedicated touch screen? Is it a web browser? Is it a mobile device? Some other thing that will allow you to not have to be limited to what you can accomplish. There's more examples about that, I believe, but I think that one is probably the most obvious and the most tangible. But if you're, I guess another good one is if you're writing in a language that can run on different types of products, you're not necessarily tied to a dedicated processor. Again, I'm not necessarily promoting the fact that you shouldn't be doing that, but these are some of the concepts that I think people's minds are going to be open to as they are pressed to solve their needs and they're unable to get the hardware that they were expecting.
Uh, you're correct there, Steve. And I'll go a little further on that, and because I'm coming at this as a focus on my end users, and I'm a champion for them. So I'm their connection between our manufacturers, our vendors, and what they're using. So, do I have brand loyalty? I do, to a point. My loyalty lies to my end users. So I need to be able to make sure the students are getting educated. And the way I make sure that it's happening is the faculty members can use the technology in our classrooms to facilitate their message, their material that they're sending to these students. Now, if I'm using brand X, brand Y, brand Z, they don't care. The content that they're giving is the same. Um, and if I need to be able to quickly move and make sure that the content is getting to the students. I heard this about a year or two ago on another podcast, and it really struck a chord with me. And now, granted, he worked for a military school, so his example was a little more important than, say, someone in my school. But he was saying that the cadets didn't, like, say the projector didn't work one day, and the teacher's like, "All right, class is canceled. Projector didn't work," and moved on. That could have been vital information that cadet needed on the battlefield. Well, same here. We are educating business leaders, nurses, teachers, scientists, you name it. There, you got all, even computer science people, and hopefully some AV people in there as well. Um, and they might be missing critical information that they need for their job. So reliability is more important to me than brand. The way you're going to get my brand loyalty is the liability and the ease of moving things. So if I can take my code that I am developing and that I know works, and I have a hardware failure and I can move over quickly to another one, that's going to be what I'm looking for. If it's brand Y, brand Z, I can care less. Um, Going back to your example with the HTML5, I think that kind of also leverage with my example of AWS, say, going down. All right. Well, as you mentioned, with HTML5, you can get to it from a web browser, mobile device, dedicated touch panel. So, say I throw a dedicated touch panel in the classroom and that panel breaks, now I can access the same interface from the computer browser. The room is not unusable now. I can get going, wait for the new panel to come in and get going. So being able to have this flexibility and run more common language stuff is vital.
I think very well put. And if I could just tag on to what you said, I've worked in corporate and especially in the financial institutions, and trust me, they care if they are not going to be able to have a meeting, because every minute counts when you're dealing with traders that have a lot of money on the line. So it's not okay to have to cancel a meeting or be delayed or not being able to make the technology work. So to your point, and I think it was very well put too, that the idea is we have to make a system run so that we can support other people to be able to do their jobs, and it doesn't really matter what is making them run. It's the fact that it's up and running that's critical. The other thing I was going to touch on, and we're probably going a little bit long, is just the idea that there's also some ways to take products that you may have and either get more out of them or use them in different ways. And it comes back to our conversation about APIs in our last show, and being able to take repurpose something like maybe a device that has a camera, just for the camera controls, or being able to use switching but not do processing or calling. There a lot of products, if you can, if you get creative and you understand how they work, and you take a look at what they're capable of doing, there's a lot of functionality that isn't commonly used, that is accessible through an API, that could get you out of a jam. So it's just another idea that we could throw out there, maybe discuss in a future episode, or if listeners have some experiences or questions about that, they can reach out. It could be a good follow up.
I agree. I think that is a good follow up. Again, it's using what we can, especially as we're seeing with the supply chain issue, is we may I keep telling people now, when we need to order something, plan 6 months to a year, because that's what we're looking for. Now, that might be a little dramatic, but I rather say, yeah, you're looking at a year and get it in 4 months, because then I look like a hero. My manufacturers look like a hero. But if I say, hey, you're going to get it in 2 months and it takes 6 months, now I look like, okay, you didn't know what you were doing. So definitely any way we can speed up the process of getting our projects done is key.
And I think it also really speaks to the value that programmers can bring, especially nowadays, where they're being overlooked in some areas and being replaced by some plug and play type systems and less customized solutions. Programmers can be really an asset in these types of situations. So it's something that we, and hopefully the community that's listening, can be proud of, but also we could share with the greater AV audience. Probably a good place for us to stop, James. How can people get in touch with you and learn more about what you're up to?
As always, you can get me on Twitter at AV_James King. Definitely get involved on AV and AM, because it's a great way to connect and grow the community. I do write for the Higher Ed Digital Magazine, the IT and AV column. I'm on LinkedIn. You can get me almost anywhere on the internet.
Sounds good. And I attest that you can. For me, you can reach me at Steve Greenblatt on social media. I do some writing for AV Network at avnetwork.com, as well as my company blog at controlconcepts.net. And we definitely want to hear from you. So please keep reaching out. Let us know what you think about this episode. We talked about some interesting things, some things that were a little bit different, and let us know what you liked, and hopefully it spurred some ideas or conversations, and feedback, positive or negative, is always welcome. So please let us know. And if you could do us a favor, share one of your favorite episodes with somebody, either a friend or online. We'd really appreciate that as well. And we hope to hear from you in the future. And that's what we have for today. And this has been Ask the Programmer.